spectacle. Please welcome Meghna Jayanth.
Thank you, folks. It's so nice to be here. So I thought I will begin by, so Thirsty Suitors came out about a year and a half ago, nearly. So it's a really nice time for me to get to just look back on it a little bit. If you haven't played the game, don't worry. We'll get into it, and I will give you plenty of context for all of the mess.
There we go. Ready to go, yeah?
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Oh, can I grab the little... Excellent. All right. So I think let's just kick off with showing you our launch trailer, which I think gives you some sense of the flavor as well as all of this beautiful key art. So I was the narrative designer on Thirsty Suitors, so I had nothing to do with how beautiful it is. So Thirsty Suitors is a kind of, I describe it as like a joyful immigrant narrative where it's about a young woman coming back to her small town in the Pacific Northwest in her mid-20s after a horrible breakup. And she has to then battle all of her hot but toxic exes whose hearts she broke on the way out of town, as well as reconcile her relationships with her family by cooking, skate away her feelings in the local skate park that's also being kind of torn down and threatened. Oh yeah, so maybe we should just go back to this. Yeah. There we go. And the final battle is with your maternal grandmother. So ultimately, it's really a game about undoing intergenerational trauma. I hope you noticed the boob window on grandma as well. I was particularly proud of that. It's not autobiographical at all.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so the main premise of the game is battling all of these, your kind of 5 X's, but we do this through these kind of fantastical turn-based battles that are actually psychodrama battles that pull you into like the internal landscape of your X's, kind of Persona style. And what you're really doing is kind of going back into a past relationship that may or may not have gone the way that you thought it was. And while it kind of takes the form of this kind of turn-based battle, really, at the end of the battle, you don't really defeat your enemies, but you reconcile with them. And you kind of then have the chance of finding kind of a renewed friendship or understanding with them, or possibly even something more. So Thirsty Suitors is a bit of a like deconstructed dating sim, though spoiler alert, at the end of the game, you actually choose nobody because you're such a mess, and so you just kind of, which I think is really lovely. I think it can feel anticlimactic to some people, but I think for Jala and her journey is just much more about facing up to the mistakes of her past and figuring out who she is. And the fact that she ends the game without necessarily, I think, making a choice is really great. So you have this like wonderful scene in the diner. So these are all of like your beautiful exes, who each one of them more toxic and weird than the last. And I think the real question of the game is like, it's really funny. I think one of the really nice responses we've had to the game is, one, it's really obvious what kinds of sort of dating traumas people have experienced by watching them play the game, because you're like, oh, you go for fun, interesting. And it's really interesting to see that people really do argue about whether like we let Jala off the hook a little bit, or give her too much responsibility, or, actually, Dia was really terrible. I can't believe we kind of made friends with her in the end. Which I think it's great, because I think it's messy and it's difficult, and that's what real relationships are like. So yeah, you can have a look here. This is your final turn-based battle with Tyler. Over the course of this battle, she literally resurrects like the ghosts of your ex-suitors that you then have to like re-battle because she can't let go of the past. So this is like the graveyard of your past mistakes. None of us have experienced that in a relationship, I'm sure. Yeah, so Tyler's really your big first love, and the person that you have, she's like your best friend, you grew up together. The rupture in your relationship also caused a rupture in like your parents' relationship with her parents, and like it's this kind of enormously dramatic teenage thing. This is Irfan, who summons like a gigantic... So for Irfan, our inspiration was sort of inverse He-Man. So he's like this tiny, weedy, soft boy. And he summons like this gigantic tiger to protect him. So anytime you're close to actually like kind of speaking to each other, the tiger steps in and is like, I will protect you from this terrible witch of a woman. And so you kind of have to defeat his defense mechanism / cuddly security blanket before you can get through to him. So you can really see there's like lots of influence from kind of Persona. It's like really very psychological, but also deeply silly. I may have slightly been going through a breakup at the time. Hopefully it's cathartic for you, right? And those really aren't the only relationships that you have. So as you can see, this is like a graphic of the end of the battle where you kind of end up in this lovely reconciliation. And I think next, hopefully, we can show you a little video of the first suitor battle, and then we can kind of open the floor.
There's a lot to admire. Are those biceps even real?
Yeah, she's thirsty. Soz.
Come on, Sergio. Let's dance. Is it weird that I find your daddy issues kinda hot?
Dad is hot.
That's not what I... Ugh, forget it.
Excellent. Yeah, that gives you just a little bit of insight. There's like a whole mid-battle section where he like tears off his shirt. You go into his inner world, and he's like the person that he dreams he's going to be, and is invulnerable, obviously. And then you kind of have to summon the only thing that can shake the confidence of a South Asian man, the spectre of your mother, to hit him with a chopper. So yeah, we're really going for authenticity, shall we say? But yeah, and then we follow this on with also like these gigantic cooking sections with your mum. I think if we go back to that, we can start getting to it. But and there's also like cooking, skating. You can pet a dog. There's mini games. It's this kind of wild, maximalist extravaganza hybrid mashup thing. But I think we can kind of maybe go from there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I was really excited to invite you, Meghna, because this was a really important game for me to play. With my daughter. We play Mario games, and she's always disappointed when Princess Peach gets kidnapped and she can't play her.
Yeah.
So I was really excited to play this game with her.
Mm-hmm.
So it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a silly question, but is this an Asian game? Is this a game for Asians, or was that a perception from the public or the publishers?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So this, like our entire team, this is Outer Loop Games. We're a team of about, I think the core team was about 12, a little bit more than that. Most of us are second generation or first generation immigrants, but ranging from, so I'm Indian, and I grew up half in India, half in the UK. Eka, who's the creative director and the founder of the studio, is Sri Lankan American, but came to America, I think, as a child, so it's a much different kind of experience. Vijay Krish, who did all of this beautiful art, is Tamilian. We've got like people who are from a Russian background, from all kinds of different backgrounds. So I think we really wanted to make an immigrant game, and I think the ethos of Outer Loop was a real focus on kind of minority, like it's a minority-led studio, and we wanted to tell the kinds of stories that really aren't being told out there. So actually, Thirsty Suitors began as an idea we had to make a game about arranged marriage, and it was going to be this like much more sociological, like card-based game about arranged marriage. And then at one point, Eka and I looked at each other and were like, "So you know how I don't believe in the institution of marriage and don't want to get married, and you never had an arranged marriage. Maybe we're not the people to tell this particular story." So I think that's also like a really interesting aspect of this, right? Like, who gets to tell these stories? So I think what we really honed in on was telling a story that made sense to us. So the fact that it was set in the Pacific Northwest in this small town is a real nod to Eka growing up there. And his town was incredibly white, and I think he felt really isolated. And so we got to like reimagine Timber Hills as this teeming brown, like queer space. Which I think is great. And so it's kind of almost getting to like re-inhabit his hometown and his whole childhood experience and kind of retell it. You can also tell it's sort of set in a sort of 90s, I guess. I don't know why, I guess because we're all elder millennials and like that's an era of nostalgia for us. But I think it really was so that we could look back maybe a little bit on our childhoods as well, because we were drawing a lot from our own experiences, our families, our friends. to kind of pull it together. And Jala herself, so her dad is Sri Lankan, her mum is Indian, so she herself is kind of a hybrid. And I think we were really interested in telling those kind of hybrid stories. And if you look at the suitors as well, most of them aren't just from a single culture. And so we really got to kind of like, I don't know, I think expand the boundaries of that. And I think the game itself is also very hybrid in terms of its mechanics as well. So it kind of all fits together. It's not as one thing. It's like a melting pot in itself.
I mean, it does seem to wear some of the influences or references on its sleeve. You know, Scott Pilgrim, maybe a bit Tony Hawk or Skate, Persona 5.
Yeah.
Like, what other fun South Asian references did you kind of embed in there?
Oh my gosh, I mean, so many, but I think, well, while this was coming out, I don't know if you guys have seen the TV show We Are Lady Parts. That was a big influence. I mean, we'd written quite a lot of it by the time it came out, really. But again, I thought it was so interesting to see all of these brown stories happening in other media, kind of outside of games. We Are Lady Parts is about an all-girl Muslim punk band set in London. And if you haven't seen it, it's so good. It's just incredibly funny and charming. The same creator then went on to make this really fun film called Polite Society, which is about like the horror of Indian weddings and arranged marriages. And like it turns into this like, it's really the story of like two sisters, but then it's imbued with this kind of incredible horror underneath it. And you also get to see people doing like martial arts in lehengas, which like, come on, why not? So it's like, I think it was drawing from all of those kinds of stories. I mean, Ms. Marvel as well had just come out as well, and I thought that was such an interesting, like realistic, heartfelt portrayal of like an Indian family and a Muslim family as well. And so the space kind of felt really open for that. But again, we were also making this for like, to be honest, diaspora kids, right? This isn't like a authentic Indian story. I mean, I think actually for a really nice contrast, you can look at Venba, which is very much engaged in like authenticity. And it's like, when I play the game, I'm like taken back to my childhood in Bangalore or my friends' houses who are Tamilian, like the music and everything. Whereas, I mean, like Thirsty is in some ways a very American experience, which is something, you know, I also struggled with in terms of the writing because I'm really not. And that's such a different experience to me. But again, I think that, you know, but that was what most of the team was based in America. And so it felt true to them and it felt true to that audience.
Yeah.
It was I mean, a very kind of interesting project and like a lot of things to kind of navigate. But I think almost going back to sort of Kenny's point earlier, I think there is also a lot of interesting and useful space to just be able to talk about these stories in a way that's respectful to a culture, but isn't about necessarily like this kind of authenticity. And to be honest, this is also authentic to lots of diaspora lives, you know, where people have very different relationships with their cultures, or like, you know, do lots of diaspora kids may not even speak the language, or they're not really engaged in like, or they just watch Bollywood movies and their parents are like, oh my God, you know, there's more than Bollywood, etc. So I think for us, it took a lot of the pressure off to not only have Jala's story, but also have each of the suitors. And all of them kind of have different perspectives and different relationships with all of these ideas. So we didn't have to say, oh, this is the one way that we're doing things.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the kind of breadth of, I guess, the references and, you know, kind of exploring across the kind of diaspora experience, it also felt like the art style, the tone, the setting, the kind of intergenerational nature of the characters, even the length, it all felt really accessible.
Yeah.
Like, what was the intention there? Were you trying to reach particular demographics, audiences, or?
I think so. Personally, I'm really interested in making work that can be accessible to people who have never played a game before. And I think that's something that Outloop did really, really well. And I'm so proud of the team for that. I think it's super accessible in terms of disability as well. I mean, these things go hand in hand, right? Like accessibility is a really broad church. And once you start walking down that path, you realize, oh, this is really great for so many different audiences. But one of the really great things about this game is there are so many features to turn off. So you saw that there's quick time events. There's things that there are timing-based puzzles. There's little kind of skateboarding platforming sections. All of these can be turned off. Even the battles can be autoplayed. Like, you don't have to do that. You can still play all of this. But there is no section of the game where challenge or a lack of skill is going to stop you from progressing or enjoying the story. And I think that was really, really deliberate because, you know, I do really believe in the fact that, you know, games as a medium is becoming way more influential. It's what especially younger people are playing. But I do think that we do leave out loads of audiences that would be really interested in this. You know, I'm sorry, but trying to explain the plot of Halo to my mum is like the minute you get to Space Wizards, she's out. She's out, babe. Like, she doesn't care. Whereas, you know, the really nice thing about Thirsty is when I explain it, like, oh, it's a soap opera, really, and it's about familiar concepts and ideas. It's about family, food, love, you know, facing up to your mistakes. Like, these are just really normal human things that we all kind of have experience of, right? And I think that these are the sorts of, hopefully these feel like the sorts of games that you could get someone who's never engaged in this, who has ideas about the games industry, like, oh, it's just about like beady men shooting guns. Lots of it is, you know, and it's all about violence and it's all about these things. And you can be like, no, there's so much more here for you, and we're not going to make you feel stupid or incapable for coming to join us here, you know, or require a huge amount of knowledge from having played. Like, you know, I mean, if you pick up, like, say, an Arkham game and you haven't played Shadows of Mordor, like, you're lost, right? Like, the knowledge that we are expecting players to come with is increasingly specialized, but we're only just now becoming a mainstream industry, and I think it's really valuable to have games that are, like, accessible in this way.
No, you're definitely right. You know, a lot of games that we play, a lot of our game design students here, the most common primary verb in game design tends to be kill or fight. So I really love the main way that you kind of interact in the battle system was conversational.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was really interesting. What was the thing behind that then?
Yeah, definitely. Because basically, I mean, we kind of looked at the battle system for a bit, but the whole idea was that, I mean, you want them to be narrative battles. It's such an interesting, like, narrative challenge for me. Admittedly, you know, there's things that you look back on and we would have liked to tweak a little bit more. I do think there are times where it loses pace a little bit, and it might have been nice to actually have the... Yeah, sorry, I really am looking back on it, to have, like, the dialogue appear at the same time as the big animations, or be a little bit more thoughtful about that. But what we really wanted was almost each, like, kind of the battle unfolds with each button press triggering a piece of conversation. And actually, as you play through the game, your choices that kind of are recognized under the hood. And, you know, so the game begins with this big dating quiz that you take while Jala kind of skates around the world, which is amazing. Highly recommend all of you just put dating quizzes in the front end of your games if you want to learn things about your friends. Amazing. And then we assign you a thursona, so you can either be like the star who's just like used to people falling at their feet and is really into like status, or the bohemian who's like, I'm really flaky, sarcasm is my personality, or like the heartbreaker who's very much this like, oh, I'm aloof and I don't need anyone, but secretly yearns for connection. And those lines actually like do impact just even the dialogue that fires behind the scenes. There's like each kind of stage of the battle, you know, when you get his health bar down 50%, like triggers a little sort of piece of content dialogue where you kind of delve back into the past, or like a move into the inner world. Yeah, those are really, I think that to me was really, really fun to write. And if you notice as well, all of the impacts are illusory. So like Sergio throws a car at you, but it's a holographic car. So you never actually make impact with people. You know, there's no blood and gore in it. The battle is a metaphor, really. Yeah. It's a visual and mechanical metaphor for having a really messy argument with someone and then coming to a reconciliation with them. And I think you'll see we do a similar thing in the cooking as well. Yeah. Because the cooking sections, I think we can probably show you like a little bit of this. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are so fun to write, honestly, just Jala being, and you could like set people on fire. Yeah, so the kind of cooking sessions are really about, oh yeah, Mom, teach me how to make something. Jala, come cook with me. And then once you're trapped in the kitchen, that's when she like pounces. And it's like, so have you thought about college? Or like, oh my God, you're talking to Sergio again. But you can't escape, right? It's great. It's not how life works at all. Yeah, but in doing that, what we really realized, so I should also really say the game is entirely animated by one human being, Azo, who also does every single one of the animation tricks that you see in real life. There is like YouTube evidence of all of this. So
if you have a look at, I think on TikTok, Harvey was talking about animation reference. Yeah. You can see him like bench pressing his sofa at home or something for reference.
It's mad, yeah. Or even all of the wall running and like the skateboarding, he does all of it. So you see that actually we needed to insert like a lot more energy into the cooking. So the cooking is like this wuxia kind of martial arts thing, and like you're throwing knives, and your dad's like, "Oh, don't hurt each other," and you and your mom are really like getting into it in the kitchen, which is great. And she like constantly tells you to wash your hands, and you're like, "Yes, mom, I'm a grown up," and she's just like, "Are you really?" Yeah, so it's good. So again, like it's that energy of conversation. It's the energy of argument. We live in this kind of much more heightened reality. So one of our references is also like anime as well, or like kind of magic realism, where you can have these like big surreal moments, but you can also have like these really heartfelt kind of exchanges as well. Yeah, and then there's also skating, just in case there wasn't enough going on. So you can see there's a really Asian maximalism to all of this too. It's like, oh yeah, and here's another thing. Cool, and then we can get into so much stuff else, but one of the other things just about accessibility and playing, one of my favorite experiences of this game was that my mum, who's never picked up a console before, even though it was me and my dad who played games when I was a kid, she played this from beginning to end. And I think she only had to like auto play through like the last little skateboarding section, but she really played it all from beginning to end. And she cried at the climactic grandma battle. And that was really meaningful to me, like 10 years into my career. I mean, they've always been super supportive of me. I really got to say that. My parents are both doctors and categorically told me not to become a doctor. So like, it's like stereotype. For every stereotype, there's also the person that is living the anti-stereotype as well. And here we are, which maybe explains the game that I made. But that was, I think, it was just really powerful and meaningful to me. And I think she saw herself reflected in some of it, didn't see herself reflected in other parts, which was hilarious as well. And there were lines that grandma, so that final battle is one where, like, Jala is this main character, like, finally kind of stands up to her grandma and actually just shouts, like, I hate you. Like, why have you come to my house and turned it into a battlefield? Like, my mom, who's usually this confident woman, is now running scared behind you and judging me because I need to live up to something. Like, I hate you, which is a really, powerful, intense thing to kind of say to your grandmother. But I guess part of the power fantasy of this game is, like, being able to stand up to your immigrant parents and grandparents, and then, instead of getting a chapel thrown at you, they, like, listen and learn and grow and change, which is fun. But that confrontation is where, like, your mum finally comes in and, like, steps in to protect you, and you have a big discussion, and then your nanny, sort of promises to change, and it's like, yeah, maybe she's still passive aggressive. Like, life doesn't work in these perfect ways, but you do get a hug, and you do get to kind of, move forward a little bit. So I think that was really powerful. I think there's maybe a lot that I like put into it. Some of the lines that Nani says have definitely been said to my mom. I had to tone them down a little bit for them to be believable.
Did your grandmother play the game?
No,
Or
she
did you let her?
didn't. No, I think she saw little bits of it. But yeah, no, I think perhaps like I think sometimes some people should be yeah, you're not safe. That's not.
Well, just going back to the cooking, I thought it was a really powerful way of in-game connecting to, your mother, and for the players as well, it was a really powerful way of reconnecting with the culture. And, that was another thing that Vemba did very well.
Oh, so beautiful.
There was no sense of competition or resentment that they'd done the same kind of thing.
I was so delighted. Honestly, what's wild about it is that, there's barely any brown games in the industry. And then all of a sudden, within like a month and a half, there's 2 sort of brown games, both about food and family. But to me, I thought it was so powerful that you really got to see, even with what sounds like the same brief, so it's about brown families, and it's also about food, and it's also about mothers and children and immigration. They're totally different games. So you would think that that's like something hyper niche, but they're so different in turn. If you haven't played Venba, do play it. It's this beautiful kind of meditation, and it's so like you will cry, you will want to call your mum, which is good. We should all probably call our mums. Yeah, but it's just a completely different flavor of thing. I think what was interesting was to see that, like, I think journalists and the industry at large, the mainstream industry, was a bit like, what's going on? Is this even allowed? Surely there can be only one. And I was like, guys, soz, like, there was a like hilarious moment where in the way that like sometimes, if you are a person of color, you get mistaken for like just another random person of color who looks nothing like you. So at one point, I think a review site did put up a review of our game and put Venba's screenshot on it. And I was like, also, guys, it looks nothing alike. Thirsty Sweeties is like neon madness. And Venba is like, anyway, but so it's fine. Like even games can be microaggressed against, I guess, which is really amazing.
Well, I thought, this festival is about kind of representing diversity, ethnic, racial diversity in the games industry, and this was a great example for me. But what I also thought was really powerful was your approach to intersectionality of the game. It didn't really stop at just highlighting, the kind of the color and vibrancy of brown people in society, but you weren't afraid to really explore and center queerness, and even the character Tyler, she was, I think in the guide it mentions that she's trans.
Yeah, she's
played by a
trans
actress.
Yeah.
So I think what was interesting about that was you didn't really make it a big deal in any way.
Yeah.
Was there a discussion around that? Did you get feedback from the actor about representation or dialogue?
No, we really did. Christine was one of the first people we cast as well, and she came in, and I think one of the first things she said to us was like, I love that Tyler's story is not about being trans. Like the problem that her and Jala had is not about being trans, but I think that's maybe also slightly present in it, in that clearly they went through this difficult emotional process together, right? Like they were together while Tyler did transition, and they're almost a little bit too emotionally close and entangled in the way that lots of people in small towns, or like your best friendships that maybe you go through something together can be. So I think it's still true to the emotional resonance of those experiences. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to Jala or her extended family. I mean, one of the ways in which we were able to do that is so this is Dad. We should talk about gentle brown dads as well, because this is what happens when you die in the battles. Like you kind of get really small and then you fall down, and then Dad just catches you and like gives you some words of encouragement and like throws you back up there. Like, oh, are you really sure you want to date a man with tattoos? Oh, okay, and. We can go back to some of this, but this is Auntie Chandra, who's really, I think, for us narratively was at the heart of how this wasn't a coming out story, and why we could also like explain and show that. So Auntie Chandra is like an out lesbian, and it's Jala's dad's sister. And so all of those stories and all of those battles have already been fought in her family. And like our queer elders did that for us. And so like Auntie Chandra is probably the one who like sat Jala's parents down when she was caught kissing Tyler at like age 8. And I think that's the story in the game. And was like, all right, here's how you handle the coming out. Don't make the same mistakes you made with me. And I think that's also why I think it was really nice to highlight the fact that like queerness wasn't invented in the South Asian community like yesterday. And I think it was really important for us to, I think, we don't want to shy away from the fact that like there are problems of homophobia and also colorism and casteism and like all of these things. We hopefully touch on a little bit with some of the other characters and their experiences. So, you've also got Dia, who comes from a Brahmin family, and like, caste also really plays a role in the way in which they cut her off, and her family just, walks down the street and just doesn't even acknowledge her and threw her out when she came out. So you do want to like acknowledge that is also a reality of being queer in the South Asian community that happens. But for us, we wanted you to inhabit Jala, who gets to have, I think it's these two things, right? It's a reality because it is a representation of there are real families that are accepting, that have come through this. And then it's also a fantasy for people who don't have that, who get to like inhabit what it would be like to have a loving family and to have an accepting one. And I think the dream for us was imagining like people being able to play this game and being like, oh, maybe this is some language that I could take home to my parents or my grandparents to explain some of this, or maybe I could play this with my extended family. And the fact that this is all kind of normalized, and you're kind of almost modeling like warmth and acceptance without, I hope, being too cloying, or ridiculous about it. Could just kind of either help, or it could be a safe space as well. And I think that's also, you really see that with Dad. So also part of the structure of the game, it's about 8 hours long, and it's structured into days. And so there's this really lovely, hopefully like sort of game loop where you get narrative satisfactions within an hour, 40 minutes to an hour of play, which I think is also respectful to people who have like caring responsibilities or lives, or are worried about dying at some point, and so don't necessarily want to play a game forever. But at the end of each day, you sit on the sofa with Dad, who like waits up for you and waits for you to come home. And he's usually playing like one of your high school basketball games that he recorded, like obviously standing there, like recording it in the audience, like a massive, beautiful weirdo, and still rewatches. And then you can kind of discuss your day, or sometimes you can just say, Dad, I don't want to talk about it. It's too much. And he's like, all right. And then you fall asleep on him, and then he carries you piggyback up the stairs. And it's like, because we're often in the game, like your relationship with your mum is so fraught, and then you're like opening up all of these emotional wounds with your suitors, and they're like, how did you do this? Why did you do this to me? You broke my heart. Like, think about what you've done. And like, and then it's really, I think, important for us to also allow the player to feel like held and safe too, right? And I think to also model like a gentle dad. Like I had a gentle brown dad. And it's, and Eka's stepdad was also a gentle, sweet brown dad. And it's sad to me that you don't see that. And especially in games where like brown male bodies are often like people that you kill, they're enemies that you shoot. And they're often, or terrorists, or they are devoid of so much humanity. And so it felt really important for us to kind of include that. And I also think for lots of people, I think, as if you read here, like, lots of people have said, my dad was nothing like this. And it was so meaningful for me to just like sit on the sofa and have Dad carry me up the stairs. Yeah. And I think that's, really beautiful, like really meaningful. Yeah.
No, I definitely felt that. You're right. We so rarely see ourselves represented in media. And when we do, it's often stereotyped or kind of one note, like you said, like maybe the geeky scientist or, the terrorist or whatever. Which is awful. And I always used to think, why couldn't, if it was an American high school drama, why couldn't we be the jock or the funny guy or, the douchebag or whatever it is? And I think that's what is so vibrant and powerful about this game. It's got such an amazing roster of characters. Do you want to take us through any of the highlights or your favorites?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe we could, I could go back to, so Dia so my personal favorite suitor is Dia, because she's definitely not modeled after someone who broke my heart when I was a teenager in any fashion. But she's just really great. She's like the ultimate like cool girl who was like hiding the secret, and she really couldn't come out. And you and Jala and she have this whole kind of secret romance, because Dia has to keep it all secret, and then Jala kind of like dumps her in this catastrophic way because like Tyler confesses her feelings and Tyler can come out, and so Dia's like further pushed into the shadows. And there's this whole storyline about how she was abandoned at Battle of the Bands, and that's why she's never been able to pick up a guitar since, apart from in her like inner sanctum. And so there's this really cool stuff here. So like all of her attacks are like guitar based. She's really angry about middle school's Battle of the Bands. She sits on this like peacock throne, which is also like drawn from like the peacock throne of the Mughals. But what's really cool about this is like all of the peacock eyes follow you as you're walking around the screen, which is just like, it's so cool, so creepy. And then she has like a bunch of like mean girl crystal minions who are just like, it's kind of like a Greek chorus, but it's also like if you've seen like Heathers or any other like high school film, they're just like standing around. They're like, oh Maharani, like she, because Dia is obviously the queen in her landscape, and she's like, you're so cool, you're so brave. She's but a worm against you, and Dia's like, oh no, stop. So it's great. Like it was just super fun to write. So each one, and there she is, like just this glorious, beautiful entity. I don't know how she's not everyone's favorite, but apparently people have different tastes. We can just go back a little bit. Yeah, so you've got like soft boy Irfan, What was really funny was in casting them. So we did all of this is fully voice acted, which was amazing. And it was incredible how, like, the people that we cast were exactly like these guys. Like Irfan's actor at one point took a phone call in the middle of the recording session to answer his mum, who had called him to ask him to program her GPS via his phone. So that, and he just did that remotely. They were in a completely different city.
That
And, like,
reminds me, I need to turn my phone off just in case mom rings.
but I was just like, thank you, Irfan. Like, and I was just, yeah, anyway. Sergio, the actor who plays Sergio, is really great. Like, this super confident, like, very Sergio guy who also tangos. And he like did his performance, and he was just like, my friends are gonna like laugh themselves sick at this because they're gonna be like, wow, they wrote this character and it's you. And I was like, devastating. That's Bruno over there, who's like the archetypical F-boy. So you have this, I mean, I will spoil a little bit of this for you, but you should really go play it. It won't ruin anything really. But you have this whole battle with him because he was one of the only people that broke your heart. So he like blew through town, this summer when you were a teenager, and I was like, come on, baby, get in the back of my truck. And you did. And then he like abandoned you 2 towns over, and you had to call your parents to come and pick you up. Very embarrassing vibes. And then he comes back and he does it all over again. And you've just had to face up to all of your like mistakes. And it's like the perfect time where Jala's really wavering, because it's like, should I stay here and face all my mistakes, or should I just blow this joint? And and so you kind of get those sort of choices. That's Irfan and his cat. Oh yeah, the tiger is actually his very diabetic, angry, grumpy tomcat.
The tiger's called Shahrukh.
Yeah, Shahrukh.
Shahrukh.
After Shah Rukh
SRK.
Khan,
Yeah.
exactly, after SRK, who's like this, mega star, basically. Yeah, exactly. And is also beautifully voiced by like a really great actor. That's Tyler, who's obviously like the coolest person in the world. What was Jala doing, thinking of going out with this parade of losers when Tyler's waiting at home for her? No idea. She's an idiot. That's Andale, who is someone who they come into Jala's life kind of much later and don't really know the dramatic backstory of all of this, and then kind of falls for Jala, but it's like this whole gigantic mess. Andale is also genderqueer and is South African. We got a South African actor to play that. With Sunny, who's the producer on our team, is South African as well. So we really wanted to like represent a little bit of that flavor in the game. When we were doing the voiceover sessions with Andale's actor, there was a power cut which went out, which is also like the most like South African / Indian thing as well. And I was like, yeah, no, it's fine. This is very real. Yeah, and then of course there's mum, there's dad, there's Auntie Chandra, grandma.
To be honest, I've got to say grandma was probably my favorite.
Is grandma your favorite?
So she's kind of antagonistic character, but it's so rare to see older women in a position of like power and kind of agency. So tell me more about like what was your thing about positioning her as the kind of big bad?
Yeah, I mean, for me it was easy because I have 2 very complicated, interesting women as grandmothers, who are, are very, very extraordinary women. My father's mother like worked very much outside the home. She was a politician and like a very successful one, and my mother's mom, my grandfather was in the army for a long time, and so really raised my mom and her brother on her own while also working, and came from a very like, working class family, moved to Bangalore, and also did the classic thing of moving from the village to the urban center and then moving up by 2 caste ranks, And so my mom only like discovered that she was from a much lower caste background, like in her 20s, and like they hid it even from her. And my grandma sort of refuses to talk about it really to this day. Like you try and have it like conversation with her about it, and she's like, "What are you talking about? We're Nayars," and it's like, we're not there. We're really not. But there's so much shame embedded in it, right? Which is, so it's interesting. Like all of those elisions, you can see that they're really helpful for them, but they also mean that you lose these huge parts of your history that are really quite hard to kind of reconstruct in a way, and you kind of have to do it for yourself. But yeah, so that it was really my grandmothers were a lot of the kind of inspiration for that, and I think you know, my mum and my grandma, my mother's mother, have this tradition where every time I go to India, I go once a year in order to not be disowned. And we just go and get our nails done together. And it's like just the 3 generations of us. And there's something really beautiful about that. But sometimes I see my mum talking to my grandma, and I'm like, oh my God. You know, it's like seeing your future. Or I like look in the mirror, and I just see my grandmother's cheekbones in my face. And I think there's something about the inescapability of all of it. And yeah, maybe it was, I think partly me also wanting to like, you know, how do you, I think it's a question that a lot of us from who are immigrants and we're also looking back at our own mothers and grandmothers really ask is like, how can you live with some of these painful things? How can you accept people who are from a very different time and a very different place and still be true to yourself? I think there are many things that Grand Nani in the game says. I think sometimes she says the things that are my own internal voice, right? Like there's this moment where she's like, oh, you're here in the West and, you know, you're all of your brains, your knowledge and your soul, you're coming here and building the colonizers' empire for them. You know, why aren't you at home? And, you know, and that's a little voice that happens to me a lot, right? And there's this like lure of, you know, she's almost in the game. Partly because I think she's trying to mess with your relationship with your mother, and partly because it's true, because those are the best manipulations, right? There's a little bit of truth to them, and there's also a little bit of cruelty embedded in there. Is that she's almost trying to lure Jala back to India, and there's a huge resentment that she has for her daughter for leaving, for going elsewhere and for like kind of escaping. You know, and Jala's mum as well, like one of the reasons that she really comes back to reconcile with Jala is because she says, you know, I moved continents to escape my family, my mother, because, you know, Jala's grandma, I think, had these huge dreams and aspirations for her daughter, and she sees her daughter's life with a man she really loves who's a pharmacist, and she's a teacher rather than a university professor. Like her life is, she just wants more for her in this lovely way, but also like, you know, belittles what she really does have. And I think that's a really sort of complicated thing. And you know, I think in a really classic way, she's kind of trying to lure Jala back and be like, oh, let me remake, like I made mistakes with her, like that's over, like I have another chance with you. And it's an uncomfortable position to be in, right? Like, because you're like, oh no, I'm actually my own person rather than an opportunity for you to correct your mistakes. I think that's really hard, especially in Asian culture as well, right? Like where you're really taught that feeling of you owe things to your parents. You know, there's much less of a focus on your independence and your desires and much more about what you owe to the family. And I think there's something really great and beautiful about that, but there's also, it can be really dark, and like how do you individuate and how do you kind of create that balance? And I think shouting that you're at your grandmother that you hate her is one way of doing it. Jala's way, don't necessarily fully recommend that. But you know, she lives, so that's something.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'd before we finish, it'd be great to throw this out to you. Anyone got any questions about the game, narrative, cultural representation? Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't even like talk about all of the great music or any of that.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I work at Lewis Silkin in their interactive entertainment team, which is a law firm. First of all, thank you for that. It was great. When you mentioned Polite Society as an inspiration, I was like, of course. I see it.
100%.
I wanted to ask you, there's been this real rise in the phenomenon of like cozy games where the focus is not kind of fighting and violence, and this game almost looks like a bit of a hybrid where there is fighting, but it's not violent and you can auto-play it. Do you see it as a cozy game? What do you kind of think about that whole phenomenon?
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated one, like cozy, wholesome. I think some people call it a cozy game, but I think, and in terms of its mechanics, I think it kind of can be, though I really wonder about like the quick time events and the twitchiness of it. But what's interesting about this is that a lot of people found it a very uncozy, like difficult experience to play, mostly because I think we're so in some ways inured to like murdering people. That doesn't feel emotionally difficult. Whereas I think the emotional violence of this, you know, a lot of people came up to me and were like, but I feel so bad. Like she's such a bad person. And I was like, she's not a murderer. Like, she's not shooting people. She's just slightly shitty. Like, we're all kind of slightly shitty. Like, it's not, yeah, okay, like, and she's like, okay, she cheats on someone. Like, you know, I don't know, like, these are not things that are good, and we're not being like, oh, yeah, Jala, maintain your messiness for the rest of your life. But she's messy in very normal ways, and I think that can feel actually very confronting to people, because I think it can be very easy for many of these situations to bring up, like, things that you've had in your own relationship or experience, or like ways in which your relationship is complicated with your mum or your or your sister even as well. So like I think we didn't even touch on Arnie or the internal narrator, which I probably should. So Arnie is your sister. She's getting married but hasn't invited you to the wedding because you haven't been answering her phone calls for about 6 months. And so you're trying to like track her down and find her. But because you really miss her so much, you've also invented a voice inside your head that has her face and her voice, but it's really not her. And as the game progresses as well, the voice inside your head starts getting increasingly jealous of your attempts to like reconcile with her as well. And you have to have like this big confrontation with her. So I don't know. If you find a really intense therapy session cozy, then maybe Thirsty is cozy. But I'm okay with it being called, you know, a cozy or wholesome game, but I think it's such a complicated thing what we each find like wholesome. I did hear about this woman was talking to me about like when she was in labor, she just played Doom, and that was her cozy game, because it was, and maybe like when you're in labor, like Doom is cozy. I don't know, like it's not, you know, I would have never considered it as such, but yeah, the circumstances, like, you know, who knows.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Anyone else? Yeah, Colm?
Hey, you mentioned that you wanted people who like hadn't played games before to be able to play
Yeah.
this, but at the same time, like it looks like there's a lot of like deep, specific video game stuff within the game. Like you talked about health bars, you talked about a sort of phase transition for the boss. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if like when you saw people playing it that hadn't
Yeah.
encountered them before, like, you know, are those concepts clear, because you know they're very familiar to video game players,
Yeah.
but B, then like if that stuff kind of bedded in and how they responded to those kinds of concepts, and
Yeah.
if they worked with those players the same way they do with more experienced players.
Yeah, no, I think it's like, it's incredible what people find really confusing, and it's a real revelation to you. And I think it's really important for game designers to, I think game designers not only need to like play their game with people who have never played a game before, but they need to play games with people who are bad at games. I'm constantly saying this to people. Like, it's a real, I'm actually shit at games. And I'm like, this is an asset. I am an asset on your team, because the thing is, most of us in this industry are like intense nerds about what we do, and and you play the game with like your colleagues who are all really good. 50% of your players are going to be bad at your game, like just as facts, you know. And so I think that's really important. What we really found was that the narrative really pushed people along, because they could understand how an argument goes. And I think because as you lower the health bars, like at 75%, at 50%, and at 25%, you get another little chunk of story, and it moves it forward. So it's almost like the rules of storytelling helped them to like orient themselves a little bit more, even when they were a little bit like confused or overwhelmed by kind of how things went. But I think one of the other things is the cooking sections were a really interesting one, because Dad is very encouraging to you, and Mum basically gives you zero encouragement, even if you're really good. And that was really interesting to watch people play, and you really saw people's personalities. Because I was like, no, but that's that's the joke, guys. And then like my really overachieving friend played it, and like to watch her get so frustrated at not getting praise from Mum was just like really incredible. I mean, it was great for me. I think it was traumatic for her. But yeah, no, I think you really can't underestimate that. I think what was really great was that like after you lose a few times, the game itself, we also have a character called Uncle Hinty, who's like the brown dad at the wedding that you don't want to let have the mic. But he's the guy who just comes in and does your tutorialization. It's also voiced by Eka, who's the studio director, so he just says Hinty in a bunch of really creepy tones. It's great. But Hinty comes in and is like, hey, do you want to switch up these these settings. So I think that really helped as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. So big round of applause to Meghna, Jayanth.
Thank you.